Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. Plenty of slave narratives, fictional and non-fictional, have documented the sexual exploitation of Black slaves by whites and how it distorted relations between slave men and women. But almost nothing has been written about homosexuality among slaves, the extent to which it existed, and whether it was tolerated or punished. In his novel, The Prophets, Robert Jones Jr. explores the tender love story of Samuel and Isaiah, two teenage slaves on a Mississippi cotton plantation. Imagining their inner lives and the inner lives of those around them, the novel reveals the solace that their relationship brings them, as well as the dangers it exposes them to. The Prophets is published by G.P. Putnam Sons. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Robert, until I read your book, I had never even thought about whether there were homosexual relationships among slaves. Do you know of any research that shows that there were such relationships and how they were regarded?
Well, when I started writing the book back in 2006, there was no such thing. As I was going through the process of writing the book toward the latter end, we come to understand that there was a gentleman by the name of William Dorsey Swan, who was an enslaved man who was also gay and became America's first drag queen. So that lets us know that people like him existed. It's just that their narratives have been ignored or erased.
Is that why you decided to write the book?
That is exactly why Toni Morrison herself said, if you cannot find the book you wish to read, then you must write it. And I could not find this book anywhere I searched.
You mentioned Toni Morrison, who I know is one of your role models. And I remember one of the things she did in books like Beloved was to explore the inner lives of slaves, which we might not be able to imagine otherwise. And is that what you set out to do, to explore the inner lives of Samuel and Isaiah?
Absolutely. One of the things that I don't like about books about this time period is the way in which slavery itself becomes the main character, and the Black people who were enslaved are sort of relegated to position of slave, which to me means non-person. And it was very important for me to communicate and to know that my ancestors were not non-people. They were people to whom something disgusting was done, and that slavery is not the sin of my ancestors, it's the sin of those who enslaved them. And so, in order to make this into a literary venture, I had to ensure that with each and every enslaved character that I wrote, that their lives were as full, as dimensional, as rich as I possibly could make them. And I actually reread Beloved before starting this work because Toni Morrison also did that tremendous work to put the enslaved person at the center and let us know that they had full lives beyond being defined by this institution of slavery.
So, how would you describe Samuel and Isaiah's relationship?
Love at first sight. They meet as children and they instantly have a connection, although as children they don't understand what that connection is. But as they get older, they begin to realize that they are deeply in love with one another, and are terrified at the same time of what that love might mean, not because they are of the same gender and in love, but because the institution of slavery, it can be snatched away from them at any time. So that's where the fear lies. But the love is so great that neither of them can deny it.
In the dehumanizing conditions of slavery, would you say that it was their relationship that saved them?
In many ways, yes. It is the ability to love yourself and to love the other people who are experiencing what you are experiencing in the midst of degradation is probably what got our ancestors through. It is what other way can a human being deal with the constant terror and horror and violence of something like slavery, if not for the hope of something like love?
It seems that most of the slaves on the plantation were aware of Samuel and Isaiah's relationship. And it seems that for the most part, they were okay with it until Amos, the slave who decided to become a preacher, started preaching that was immoral. Is that accurate?
Yeah, in my research for this novel, what I discovered was that in, I loathe to call it pre-colonial Africa, but Africa before Europeans um, colonized, our ancestors had really complex and quite contemporary ideas about gender, gender identity, and sexuality. They did not see something like homosexuality as abnormal or unnatural. They saw it as part of the landscape, that it did not even qualify for a name other than love, like we would think of heterosexuality. So it's not until Christian missionaries come in to these villages and these kingdoms, and they see this practice, this idea, this culture, and deem it degenerate, that our ancestors begin to take on those Christian principles and begin to see things that they have been fine with for thousands of years, for millennia, as sinful. And that is the reason why the character Amos he sort of symbolizes that same sort of Christian missionary sort of break from our traditional practices.
In fact, you there's a parallel story in the book about a couple of young African men who actually are getting married on the day that the I guess it's the Dutch missionaries come over and start enslaving some of their people, and I guess that parallel story is where you wanted to point out that um, we didn't get so screwed up about sexuality until the colonialists came, the Christians came to Africa.
That's right. That's right. I actually drew on an actual tribe called the Dagara tribe, people who occupy a territory now known as Burkina Faso. And they had a special place for what we call queer people in their tribe, which is they were the guardians of the gate. They were not just guardians of the village gates, but of the gates between the here and the hereafter. And so they held a special place in these communities. And I wanted to sort of pay homage to that as a way to say, see, this is how it used to be before we were interfered with.
One of the things that set Samuel and Isaiah up for disaster was their refusal to become breeders for the plantation, to have sex with the slave women in order to father more slaves. I was not sure, but did either one of them ever in the book ever sleep with a woman?
They attempted. It was Isaiah's attempt with Essie, but he could not perform because neither of them actually wanted to do it, and so neither of them could really perform. But in my research for the book, one of the most horrifying things I discovered was the existence of breeding farms where plantation owners and others would force enslaved Black people to breed. And if they did not, they would rape them and ensure that they would continue to create additional enslaved people to keep the slave owner as wealthy as possible. And so that part of the book is where I sort of explore what that actually means and how we often don't see these things, rape and the institution of slavery, as going hand in hand, but they absolutely do.
It seemed that whether you were gay or straight, a slave couldn't help being sucked into the sexual whims of white people. Samuel and Isaiah were forced to undergo a grueling punishment after Ruth, the mistress of the plantation, made sexual overtures to Samuel and then turned around and accused Samuel and Isaiah of, I guess being fresh, looking at her in a certain way. I was a little confused about what happened in the barn. Did Ruth change her mind about wanting to have sex with Samuel, or was it that Samuel just wasn't able to get aroused by her and she went away? What happened there?
She was disgusted by the idea that he didn't want her. And so to punish him for one, not performing, and two, not being attracted to her, not bending to her will, she lied and said that they did something untoward toward her, which resulted in their punishment, which is something that historically we know occurs. Um, we don't have to go all the way back to Emmett Till. We could look at contemporary times and see that that is still the case, where white women weaponize their womanhood against Black men.
So then we see Isaiah getting drawn into a sexual relationship with Timothy, who is the plantation owner's gay son. Um, why does, and then later Timothy gets murdered by Samuel. Why does Samuel murder Timothy? Was it a case of jealousy? Was it to free Isaiah from this relationship with Timothy? What was it?
It was all of the above. The idea that he had had enough, that whiteness could have a lot of things, but it could not have that, which is the love between he and Isaiah. And he wanted to put a stop to it. They were leaving, they were preparing to go, and he said this would be his last act, so that Empty, the plantation, would remember him for that more than it would remember him for the degradation he endured at its hands. And so he was doing it for Isaiah, he was doing it for himself, he was doing it for the ancestors.
Do you see Samuel as a symbol of Black resistance to white authority? He was a much more angry person than Isaiah was.
I see Samuel as an aspect of Black resistance, but an aspect of Black resistance that has also a price, because we do have to remember violence is unpredictable. And when we engage in it, we have to understand that it might not always go our way. We might initially get the catharsis, we might initially get the a goal perhaps achieved, but it also opens us up to the karmic nature of the universe, and that violence might be turned around back on us. Isaiah says about Samuel in one place in the book, he never understands that a last resort should be last and not first. Because Isaiah's approach is we have to do this in a more measured, strategic, thoughtful way. We can't just go to the violence, because we are currently in the position where the our oppressor has more firepower. So we have to be very careful about how we approach this. So in some ways, Samuel is a form of resistance, but also a cautionary tale.
You mentioned that the name of the plantation is Empty. Why empty?
For the enslaved, they call it empty. The plantation owner calls it Elizabeth, but they call it empty because they realize that is what it does to everyone on it, including the enslaver. Is it empties you out. It tries to diminish your humanity. It tries to take away from you what is yours by right, as a human being. And so they call it for what it is.
One theme that runs through the book is the confusion that slaves experienced about their identities. One example was Adam, who is the son of the plantation owner. He's very fair, looks white, but is considered Black. His father never acknowledges him as his son. I suppose he's probably resented by some of the darker skinned slaves. And he doesn't feel at home anywhere. He doesn't know who he is. Uh, if he has any ambitions, he realizes they will probably come to naught. He's lost. Um, a confusion that was probably felt by most slaves.
Probably. Um, Adam is a very interesting character for me because he really strikes at how ridiculous the concept of race is. particularly in the way in which white supremacy defines it. It is whiteness is a creation of white supremacy, but also a particular kind of blackness is a creation of white supremacy too. This idea that one drop of black blood, if your great great grandparent was black and everybody else in your family was white, you are black. Does that make any sense? So he provides a way for me to talk about the confusion around this idea of race, that it is not something that is inherent to nature. It is something that is flawed and constructed by human beings for a particular purpose of subjugation, of separation, of dehumanization. And Adam's confusion is also my confusion, is also the confusion of the construction itself as to how does this work? And why has it been successful for so long to keep us separated as a human species?
Tell me about your women characters, because they also seem to suffer from, I guess all slaves suffer from this kind of confusion of not really being able to be who they are, find out who they are. And the women in particular, they also suffer from having thwarted dreams. Do you want to talk about some of your women characters?
Yes, most people say that Maggie is their favorite character in the book. Maggie is she works in the house. She's the cook for the plantation. She does the cleaning of the big house. Um, the women characters were very important to me because they represented, for me, the lineage that I'm writing in. Because I find that Black women writers are the real geniuses of writing about the Black experience, whether it is beginning with Phyllis Wheatley, Zora Neale Hurston, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Gail Jones, Toni Cade Bambara, and the list goes on. These women are writing about what was and what is in a way that almost no one else is writing about for Black people. And so I wanted to pay homage to that by creating Black women characters that stood the test of time, and that also paid honor to the Black women that I come from. I come from Black women who carried razor blades in their mouths in the South because they didn't know what was liable to jump out at them, Black or white. And so, um, being a Black woman in this time, you didn't have to just worry about the white people. You also, unfortunately, had to worry about the Black men who saw how you were being degraded, and in many cases, rather than stop the degradation, joined in on it.
Right.
And that created a split that we still feel to this day under the banner of what is called misogynoir, the hatred of Black women. We still see it to this day when we look at, for example, rap videos, the ways in which Black women are regarded. And so these women characters were my way of showing not all Black women are the same. Black women have their own separate pains and joys. And I wanted to make sure that their fullness, their roundness, their humanity was also encapsulated in this book.
Now, when I was doing a second reading of the book, uh, I believe Maggie turned out to be, and I had known this before, Maggie turned out to be Samuel's mother, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. Um, why name the book The Prophets, and why the chapters in the book named after books of the Bible?
I named the book The Prophets because what I realized maybe midway through writing this book, and it took me 14 years to write, that each of these characters were telling us things that was valuable information for us as human beings if we wanted to be better. Even the white characters were telling us things about themselves that enlightened us in the same ways that we looked to prophets either in uh, Islamic faith, in Christian faith, in Judaism, in other religions, that these characters had something important to impart. And the reason why I entitled the book with biblical chapters and gave many of the characters Christian names was to illustrate the ways in which Christianity played a role in the subjugation of Black people, um, but also the ways in which we were able to use Christianity as a sort of way to strategize our way out of many of the conditions we faced under slavery.
14 years in the writing. How old were you? 5 years old when you started?
I will be 50 in April. Oh, well, we are in April. I will be 50 this month. I started this book in 2006 in my first year of grad school. I was terrified to write it because it was something that I had not seen before, and that the only time I had ever seen Blackness and queerness talked about in this time period was always in the context of sexual assault or rape or some sort of depravity, but never in the form of love. So I was afraid to write, and also I was working. In undergrad I had 3 part-time jobs. In grad school I had 2 part-time jobs, and then when I graduated I had a full-time job. And so I had to find the time during the witching hour, 3 o'clock in the morning, writing for an hour, going back to sleep, and then waking up at 6 in the morning to get ready for work, and writing on the subway train. Um, so I was writing in bits and pieces, and so that is why it took me so very long to write.
Talking about love, aside from Amos and Essie, who seem to have a real emotional bond, it seemed that Samuel and Isaac were the only slaves in the story who were able to find real love.
Yeah, because one of the things the institution of slavery was excellent at was destroying, or at least breaking up the idea of Black romance and Black love, because it made it dangerous. If I love you, at any moment you can be snatched away from me and I will be left in a shambles. So it's better to love a little or not love at all, because what's the point? And we see the ramifications of that today in the ways in which we regard one another as Black people. We are still in some ways afraid to love one another because of what might be snatched away. We're in a time now where we're waiting for a verdict on the murder of George Floyd. Um, how a Black man can be murdered on camera calling for his mother, you know, the one person who loved him unconditionally, and she was gone, she was taken from him. And so even now, we living under the terror of white supremacy, Black love is a radical idea, because we're always bombarded with images of Black violence. We're told that we are a violent, degenerate people, but we're never told that we're also a deeply loving people. And so I wanted to show both the ways in which white supremacy destroys our capacity for love, and the ways in which we love courageously in spite of white supremacy.
I found your writing very lush and poetic. Um, uh, would you read a small excerpt of it for us?
I will. Empty was all Samuel had ever known. His first memory was lying on a blanket, being surrounded by cotton plants, and hearing voices moan out a song. Suddenly, he was at someone's breast, and she was smiling. Then he was among a bunch of children, and they took some of the other children away, and he was left there for a few to carry water back and forth from the well to the field. Soon he would carry the food, first for people, then for animals, and all the days ran together, weren't worth delineating until the boy came, the one with the dry lips and skin as black as the sun could make it. Samuel gave him some water, and Isaiah peeked into his soul. It shocked Samuel's eyes wide open to feel something touch him from the inside, like a song unfolding in his gut. It tickled. He figured that was the day he was truly born. That was his birthday, if he ever had one.
You know, I'm always amazed by fiction writers' knowledge of the natural world, of the names of different plants and flowers and trees and animals, your description of the forest, the thick forest that was part of the plantation, of different kinds of birds. How did you learn all of that natural stuff?
I had to do a lot of research. And I also got a lot of help from the proofreader of the book. She was able to tell me when I got things wrong. This flower isn't in bloom at this time. You might want to think about these as choices. So it was a team effort to ensure that these were the plants that existed at that time in Mississippi. These were the trees that existed at that time. These were the flowers. These were the animals. And to ensure that each of them were described with as much beauty as I could imagine.
What kind of reaction have you gotten to the book?
Um, Mostly positive, which was a great surprise to me. I was expecting quite a bit of negativity. One, from people who think, why do we have to keep writing about this time period? Don't we have enough books about slavery? Can we write about another time in our history? To which I say, yes, the Black experience is a broad one, but this is one that is rich for mining. If there were 2 million enslaved people, there are 2 million stories to tell. Also, I was afraid that people might push back at the idea that Black queer people could have possibly existed in this time period, that they imagine that queerness is a modern identity, and therefore people who had homosexual tendencies or whatever they wish to call them may not have been able to express it, which I find to be quite strange because um, it is a natural part of someone's makeup. You express it because it is naturally you, not because someone gave it a name. But what I have experienced is that a lot of people were moved by this and say, I never thought about two Black queer people in love during this time period. So thank you for writing this book.
Well, you certainly do open a whole new window on slavery and how it affected people and who the slaves were and what their inner lives were. In addition to writing a book that's very moving and has beautiful prose. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Oh,
I'd like to thank Robert Jones Jr., the author of The Prophets, for joining me today. The book is published by G.P. Putnam Sons and is available online and in bookstores. To learn about our upcoming shows, be sure to follow us on Twitter at One-to-One CUNY TV. For the City University of New York and One-to-One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.